Daily is Daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. I will ride with this group. Seriously, man. Please. And away we go.
There he is. He's back with some hardware on the left ring finger, folks.
Big ring. It's a nice ring.
How do we feel? The mini moon, you spent 3 days at the Caesars Palace pool eating lavish meals in Vegas. Someone almost died on his plane ride back yesterday, but Declan's back, folks.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there was a medical emergency on the plane ride back home yesterday, about an hour into the 3.5-hour flight. I don't know what happened. He seemed to be okay, but it was a good omen to come back home that there's someone with a medical emergency somewhere over, at that point, over Denver. I was like, oh, great, we're going to land.
Declan told me before the show that it was one of those where they called for a medical professional, if there's a medical professional on the plane.
Yeah.
What if you're like a foot doctor, but someone's having a heart problem? Do you raise your hand?
Better than nothing. Yeah. Because you probably know.
What if you're kind of hungover and you're watching a movie?
Well, then you just slink
me,
down.
Which is what I was doing.
I'd slink down in my seat. And just
I watched Maverick for the first time since I saw it in theaters. Top Gun for the first time since we all watched it in theaters like 2 years ago. Phenomenal movie.
It's an amazing movie. One of the great sequels.
So wait, so they called for a medical professional because there was an emergency, which is incredibly unfortunate. But you didn't have to land, and you made it all the way here without landing.
I was
okay.
I was convinced
I got a question.
We were going to have an emergency.
I don't mean to be
landing.
a jerk about this, but just how serious is the problem if you call for a doctor and then you stay in the air until Minneapolis?
And the
like,
guy
are we talking about?
I know
It's Vegas, and I feel like crap, and I think something might be wrong. I think you got to suck that up.
Or was
I think you got to suck that up. I mean, just because you might have a couple of chest pains because you just drank yourself silly, right?
Take some Pepto.
Like if you have to land, I would almost be upset in some ways that we didn't land because then you shouldn't have called for the doctors.
Well, yeah, I agree. And what I thought was hilarious was the guy that was in the row with a medical professional that like got up and went, and the emergency was clearly like towards first class or like Delta Comfort. It was towards the front of the plane, and we were like row 25, so we were back. But the row that had the medical professional in front of me, other guy pinged his thing and said, "Can I still get a drink though?" Like he still wanted his complimentary beverage, which I found hilarious. I found absolutely hilarious.
Oh my God, I'd be so pissed off.
It's totally a Larry David moment where you're just like, there's a medical emergency happening,
but
you're like,
I'm quite parched. Can you just go grab one of those
just go
ginger ale cans, bring it over
there.
here?
I don't really think it's an emergency. I don't think it's an emergency. Just recline.
Emergency is I'm parched.
Let him recline. That's all he needed.
You know where you can get a drink before we get into the meat of the show today? I have a ranking for you. Park Tavern in St. Louis Park. That's the official sports bar of the sports dad himself.
That's exactly right. And going back, I've talked about having parties for, I'm talking a lot of folks at Park Tavern. I've talked about the bowling. I've talked about the fun. But how about the Twins? The Twins are in very good shape to make a playoff run here. And guess what? A lot of us can't, including Sports Dad, watch them because we don't have the Twins now and Bally's on Comcast. But you know who does have the Twins every single game on multiple TVs? Park Tavern. And so any game that you want to watch, Park Tavern has the game. And you never know, you might stop in and see Sports Dad there because I've been going there to watch games as well. Now, here's the nice thing, though, and Phil can attest to this. So you're thinking, okay, Sports Dad, that's great. You like to be inside, but it's gorgeous outside. I want to be outside watching the games. Phil Mackey knows the patio at Park Tavern, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Second to none. Outdoors. Very nice. Very nice. So anyway.
Who's got two thumbs and likes patios? This guy right here.
Exactly right. Timberwolves, you were there like all of the road games at least. Happy hour Monday through Friday, open 365. That's right, no days off. Fantastic beer selection located at Highway 7 and Louisiana in St. Louis Park. Check out their website, parktavern.net. It's a very thorough website for more information, and I'll see you at Park Tavern to watch the Twins.
Let's do it. So, okay, we got the band back together here. Training camp, we just got the full training camp schedule emailed yesterday from Vikings PR. So Judd's camp notes are gearing up starting next week. We
Wednesday.
have we have, but the camp notes probably start kind of Monday-ish because we've got the KOC Kwesi press conference Monday, then the first practice Wednesday.
Yep.
We're going to do 53-man roster projection early next week. We're going to do a Mr. Mankato draft or whatever we rename it to. People are submitting new names for the Mr. Mankato comp. So the three of us are going to do a snake draft and put together Mr. Mankato rosters. But you guys have been sending in ranking suggestions, things for us to rank all summer long, and I have another one for you. So Bobby Bryant was the latest member of the Vikings Ring of Honor. They announced one of the legendary cornerbacks in Vikings history, if you include playoffs, tied for the franchise lead with all-time interceptions with Paul Krause, one of the Purple People Eater defensive backs from the 70s. So it sparked the discussion off microphone. Who are the next obvious candidates? I know you and Pat have kicked around Anthony Carter's name. Mm-hmm. So I put together the next 10 in line, Vikings Ring of Honor power rankings. And I thought, this would be a pretty easy exercise. I have an honorable mention list that's at least 6 deep. So we'll start there, and it's crazy.
Bobby Bryant's inclusion, which, by the way, when you look at what he did, he actually should have been talked about more, including by me especially. But when you look at some of the old school guys that aren't index, that's where it gets a little bit hanky as well, because there are more guys than I thought from the old school Vikings teams going back into the 80s that deserve it. So I'm interested to hear your list, Phil Mackey.
Well, let's start with some honorable mentions here, and it's actually I have 7 listed in the honorable mentions section. Okay. Carl Lee is the all-time Vikings leader in tackles, and I think maybe even games played by a cornerback or a defensive back.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yep.
So just a long-time Viking throughout the 80s, maybe early 90s, Carl Lee.
Yep.
Eric Kendricks is in my honorable mentions section. Xavier Rhodes, for a 3-4 year period.
Sure.
Xavier Rhodes was one of the shutdown corners in the NFL. He was the best cornerback on the best defense in the NFL in 2017.
What does it say about the Vikings' history at cornerback that Bobby Bryant is the first cornerback to go into that ring too?
Yeah, when we were a year or two ago, we were doing, at one point we did like top 25 Vikings, but then I think it was last summer we did the all-time 53-man roster, and cornerback was definitely the weakest position.
It was tough.
Yeah. Comparing it to some of the other ones. So Xavier Rhodes, Dalvin Cook is an honorable mention for me. Vikings' third leading rusher all time. He's actually ahead of Chuck Foreman in terms of rushing yards with the Vikings.
It's fair.
Keith Millard is not in the Vikings Ring of Honor, despite being the 1989 Associated Press Defensive Player of the Year. He had 18 sacks in 1989. Injuries kind of derailed him when he was 27, 28.
Yeah.
Kind of a wild behavior guy
I feel like there's actually a case to be made that he could easily be in your top 10 too.
Yeah, I kind of he was in my list of players that I thought he would be in your top 10. So this is awesome.
So he was in the 10 until I started doing even more digging and sifting.
Okay.
The committee was receiving more votes as on the top 25 polls, receiving votes. So he got bumped out of one of the last spots. I like.
He probably should be like number 1 honorable mention. These are kind of in any given order. Mm-hmm. Kirk Cousins is an honorable mention. Some people might fight this and say, how is Kirk Cousins, one of the great quarterbacks in franchise history, not in your 10? Well, we'll get to the 10 and you'll see why. But, he is statistically first, second, or third in every major passing category in Vikings history. 6 years as the Vikings starting quarterback, which is, I think, the third longest tenure. Fran Tarkenton, Tommy Kramer. Just a really good quarterback for 6 years. But really no playoff success. So he gets dinged. He gets dinged for not being a lifetime Viking, dinged for no playoff success compared to some of these other players.
Post Tarkington, it's definitely a franchise with a murky quarterback history, I think.
Yeah, you could say that. Mm-hmm. And speaking of, the last honorable mention, and I tried like hell to put this guy in the 10, but you can't do it.
I think I know.
Brett Favre.
Oh. Okay.
You thought it was going to be Dante?
Yeah,
maybe?
I was gonna go back to Vegas if that was the case.
And Declan was going to start crying.
I was going to be so pissed.
Dante, I will say, we can talk about him later if you want to, but Brett Favre, almost made my Ring of Honor list. If you're going to put him in, it'd be 75% for trolling purposes.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Just to let Packer fans know, this legend that you bow down to, we had a fling with him, and it was glorious.
Yep.
So it'd be 75% to troll Packer fans, and then 25% because he was the leader of one of the great seasons in Vikings history, one of the great quarterback seasons ever. If he would have won the Super Bowl for the Vikings, it was a Jack Morris situation where it's like 1 year, who cares? Put him in every single put a statue outside the stadium.
Your guidelines have me pondering Randall Cunningham. Now,
yeah,
I'm not saying I would include
you're
him,
right.
but hearing what you just talked about, I'm
It's accurate.
very curious to hear.
Yeah. Okay, here's the actual list. Number 10, Chad Greenway.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the NFL had a Hall of Very Good, Chad Greenway would be in the NFL Hall of Very Good. Just like a decade-ish long NFL career. Career Viking, I'm putting a little bit of stock into if you played your entire career as a Viking.
So do the Vikings.
Okay.
Like, I think you're exactly right on this. I think he does, at some point in time here, make it too.
Yep. Yeah. Also, just a great leader in the locker room, a man of the community, a likable fellow, right? He's just, everyone that comes in contact with Chad Greenway loves Chad Greenway for good. He's been a friend of the show in the past for us.
Yep.
So he's number 10 here. Number 9, Stefon Diggs. This man caught the single biggest pass in Vikings franchise history. One of the great plays in NFL history. He's the front man for one of the iconic plays in the league's history. And so I think you have to consider him. Plus, I mean, he some 1,000-yard seasons. Obviously put up bigger numbers and was just a bigger force with the Buffalo Bills. So I think the Vikings would probably put Chad Greenway well ahead of Stefon Diggs.
Correct.
But I want to make a point that when you are the front man for the most recognizable play in Vikings history, and you spent a half decade putting up pretty big numbers, Stefon Diggs deserves some consideration here. So he's number 9 for me.
All right.
Yeah, I respect it.
I want to hear more.
Okay. Yeah, we can dissect it out.
I got to get more.
Number 8, the second leading rusher in Vikings history behind only Adrian Peterson, Robert Smith. Kind of the forgotten man of some of the great offenses in NFL history. I mean, they were
interesting.
In 1998, the Vikings were the highest scoring offense in NFL history, and he was the bell cow running back. Now, the passing game received all the accolades and the posters and everything, right? Three deep. But this was a perennial 1,000-yard rusher after he overcame some injury issues early in his career. Robert Smith doesn't get talked about enough in franchise history as one of the great offensive players.
And he was also the first, like, really, with all due respect to guys like Ted Brown, the first upper echelon running back when he was drafted from Ohio State since Chuck Foreman. Like the Vikings, if you go look, the 80s were sort of, and Ted Brown was like, when I was a kid, so I liked him, but like they did not have like a real great back after Chuck until they drafted Smith. This is an interesting one. This is a very intriguing one.
And walked away from the game in his prime. The best season of his career, he walked away at age 28 and was like, I'm done.
Yeah, he had a couple years left. Yeah. So Robert Smith, number 8. Okay, number 7. And you might take issue with him being ahead of Chad Greenway by a couple slots, but Antoine Winfield is number 7.
Oh, I don't.
Okay, you covered him throughout his entire career as
he belongs
a lead Vikings beat writer. 9-year Viking, one of the great slot cornerbacks in the last 25 years of the NFL. But if you look at like his interception numbers or whatever, he specialized in the dirty work that other cornerbacks weren't willing. Blowing up screens, blowing up run plays. One of the great tackling defensive backs of all time. And he was the heart and soul and personality of that defense behind the Williams wall and Jared Allen. Just a mainstay for 9 years.
He also, if you think about how the sport is played now, was way ahead of his time, because now he'd sort of be and he was back then, but he would be officially like a hybrid, because he was a slot corner. Well, first of all, he was a good corner. They moved him to the slot as he aged, and he turned himself into a linebacker as well. Like, that guy hit. If you look at his just pure statistics, yes, you're right. It doesn't knock your socks off. If you look at what he did from a standpoint of the eye test, what he was asked to do, phenomenal. And this should count at least a little bit. I think, Phil, he's one of the smartest players we covered.
Agreed. Yeah.
I mean, he was just a bleeping football savant.
He was.
I love this one. I'm on board.
And now his son is one of the best defensive players in the NFL.
Don't mention that one. Yeah, that's too bad.
Vikings didn't need him.
Take him.
Didn't need him. Okay, number 6. Counting down the next 10 Ring of Honor candidates. A man who is 6th all-time in sacks in Vikings history. A man who has more sacks as a Viking than Jared Allen. Danielle Hunter. I don't think we think of him in that category, but the only players in Vikings history ahead of Danielle Hunter, sacks in purple, are Carl Eller, John Randall, Alan Page, Chris Dolman, Jim Marshall. So basic, and then Jared Allen is behind him as a Viking. So he's just sitting in a room full of Hall of Famers, Pro Football Hall of Famers.
Yep.
And when it's all said and done, he's going to be one of the great defensive players in Vikings history. Obviously, now his career goes to Houston, so he gets dinged for maybe not being a career Viking. But Danielle Hunter, number 6.
Injuries are going to happen too, but man, he only played 7 in 2021, 6 or 7 games, and missed the entire 2020 season. Is that correct? I think that was.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my God, if he would have had healthy seasons there, you're talking about a guy who would have racked up 15 to 20 more sacks at the rate that he was at.
So yes, realistically, a season and a half in his prime, let's call it 18 sacks minimum. I think maybe 20 plus. So let's give him 20 just for fun, because it was, he was like 25 years old, 26. If you give him those 20 sacks, he would be 4th all-time Vikings history behind Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and John Randall. He would have passed Alan Page and Chris Dolman.
He belongs.
Wow.
It's number 6, Danielle Hunter.
He belongs.
This one might be a little controversial too, but I don't know. You and I both covered this man. We saw the impact he had. Statistics are tough to come by for offensive linemen, but number 5 is Steve Hutchinson. So hear me out on this. I know he's not a career Viking, but he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer who spent half of his career in Minnesota. He spent more time with the Vikings than either of the other 2 teams he played for, Seattle or Tennessee. One of the great offensive linemen in Vikings history, and he was the starting left guard for Adrian Peterson's great run there for the first handful of years of his career. He was the starting left guard for Adrian Peterson's single-game rushing record. So Steve Hutchinson, a man of the trenches, number 5.
I buy that one. Yeah. That's so we're getting dicey now because there's a ton of names that belong. But Hutchinson also, so like if you're looking for one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that define the eventual Childress run to the conference championship game in 2009, Hutchinson to me is a perfect piece because he was signed as part of that relatively big free agent class in 2006, right? And like the whole thing was to establish the lines, exactly what the Vikings haven't done enough in recent history. And Hutchinson, as a guard, came in and changed the tone. He changed the tone of, I thought, the locker room, because he was a snarly SOB. I loved him as a player. So I think that there could easily be a case that Hutchinson is actually what you sort of wish Favre could be. Like Favre came along for the ride and had a phenomenal year, and that was fun. But Hutchinson actually reset the tone.
Yeah.
And obviously his work with the Seahawks is important, but I mean he is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. So like he made the Hall of Fame, more than half of it with the Vikings. Like I'm a little surprised he's just not in regardless. Like he should be in the Vikings Ring of Honor.
But it's when they only do one every year and there's been some years where they haven't done one
because Bud died and that the whole year was about Bud, which was fine. But yes, they don't do one on a yearly basis anymore.
So think about that, like just the 15 or 17 guys that I've mentioned here. at one per year, someone's going to have to wait 15 plus years. And then there's going to be, at some point, J.J. McCarthy is going to need to go in.
Yeah.
At some point.
But this is why I think Diggs has like no chance. Because to me, you're talking about guys who were far more defined. Like I think Hutchinson still is defined as a Viking. Like he was great with the Seahawks, but he came here, and I mean, my God, he got a $49 million 7-year contract with a poison pill in an era where at that point in time, I don't think guards were paid yet.
Yeah. Yeah, the Diggs thing is interesting because he put up bigger numbers with the Bills, but his most recognizable moment is as a Viking.
Well, and I think the moment between, especially because it also involves Case, like the moment is awesome, but I don't think the moment gets you into the ring.
Okay.
But the moment is freaking awesome.
Number 4, Adam Thielen. I think Judd might take issue.
No. He's gonna walk. He's gonna walk into this thing.
He's probably gonna finish his career as a Viking too. I mean, whether it's a trade before the season or sometime next year.
He 1,000% belongs in. I thought that he might be one on your list.
No, you could make a case, but I'm comfortable putting him number 4. I mean, from Division II and undrafted to being the first ever Mr. Mankato winner, the Mackey and Judd radio show, to multiple Pro Bowls, 1,000-yard seasons, 9 years as a Viking.
Yeah.
He's very much identifiable as Minnesotan Viking through and through, right?
Yes.
So Adam Thielen.
Yep, no problem.
Number 3, Anthony Carter. Now, maybe you can shine some light. You wrote about this for Sporting News, but
home of Sports Dad.
Just on the surface here, so Anthony Carter, by the way, he was my first ever jersey as a child. Young Phil Mackey with his Anthony Carter jersey, his little Hutch helmet. Top 5 in receiving yards, touchdowns, and catches in Vikings history, which the Vikings have one of the richest histories of wide receivers of any team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And Anthony Carter is right there in the top 5, top 3 in all these major categories. And one of the greatest playoff games in NFL history at the position. In the middle of the San Francisco 49ers' dominant run in the 80s, the 1987 playoff season, the Vikings walk into Candlestick Park in San Francisco, again, facing a dynasty. Yep. And Anthony Carter goes for 10 catches, 227 yards, and a Vikings double-digit win to bounce the Niners from the playoffs. So just you got the stamp moment in the playoffs. Great regular season career, Anthony Carter.
So the Vikings shellacked the Saints, San Fran, and they lost in the conference title game in 87 or that season to Washington. Yeah. Get this. This record still stands today. Anthony Carter in those 3 games had 642 all-purpose yards.
It's crazy.
Like that record still stands.
Yeah.
And you think about offense now, right? Like how much it's emphasized. But yes, to go back to your point. So I was like, it makes no sense he's not in statistically, right? Player-wise, it makes no sense. Think I might know why. I think the Vikings might be hesitant because of this. In October 2003, Carter pled guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The case stemmed from allegations by his wife. He was charged with domestic battery, assault with a firearm, and false imprisonment. Prosecutors in Florida allowed him to plead guilty to a lesser charge and avoid a felony conviction. He also had been arrested in 98 and 2000 on domestic battery charges. That would be the only reason I could see. And look, I'm not going to debate that, but that would be because it doesn't make any sense as a player. Now we could say if we went through all of these guys' histories, I'm sure they're not all spotless, but I wonder if that's why the Vikings are hesitant, because they know if they do this, they would definitely take some heat.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so when was the last arrest?
03. And his probation came to an end 2 years early, I think in 06. I'm just saying.
A long time ago.
I mean,
saying, if he's
20
I'm
years.
thinking that's why.
Yeah. Yeah, because statistically, and I forgot about the punt returns. So yeah, the first blowout win of those 1987 playoffs against the Saints, he had 6 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown, and 6 punt returns for 143 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
And then had the San Francisco game the next week. Just ridiculous.
Yep. And it's still, to your point, statistically high on receiving charts of a team that's had greats come after him.
Yep.
So
Anthony Carter. Okay, number 2, Adrian Peterson. He is on a short list of the great running backs in NFL history. You talk about Walter Payton, Jim Brown, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders. You have to put Adrian Peterson in a discussion among a handful of great running backs of all time. Single season rushing record for the Vikings, over 2,000 yards. Single game rushing record, NFL history, against the Chargers in 2007. Adrian Peterson, I know he's had kind of a weird go of it off the field, but at some point he's going to be in the Vikings Ring of Honor, I think, and he's the second most deserving.
He will for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first of all, he needs to just announce he's done playing. Dude, just announce you're done playing, okay?
He's like 40,
I know, but I mean, it's always nuts. He's always like, and if you're not going to go play in the, what's the league? UFL? If you're not going to go play there, you're not going to play.
Dude, they'd get a rating spike if they decided, hey, let's give him like $150,000 or something, more than the other guys. I would watch those games.
So would I. If this was baseball and jersey numbers were retired more readily, I think there's a case for 28 to go to the rafters. I don't think it'll happen here, but I mean, he should be a first ballot Hall of Fame selection. Like, there were some things at the end I didn't like for sure, but when you look at the totality of that guy's career, including rushing for 2,000 yards the season after you mangled your knee, I don't think it's hard at all.
He'll be in the birthday party Hall of Fame too for having 3 camels, I believe, at his 30th
he's in
birthday.
The broke Hall of Fame.
That's why he's fighting Le'Veon Bell on.
He keeps claiming too. He's like, I'm not broke. I'm fine financially. It's like, dude, it's okay. We knew you were going to blow your money.
We can find some ways for him to make money. So Peterson, number 2.
Okay.
And that brings us to number 1. To me, this is just who I think is most deserving in order. And he's not done playing yet, but Harrison Smith is number 1. First of all, he's a career Viking.
Yep.
Second of all, he's considered one of the greatest defensive backs of his generation in the NFL.
Yep.
He might wind up being a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I think sometimes with like safeties and offensive linemen where you're not racking up stats as much, having like a playoff run or a Super Bowl helps put a stamp on it. But he's right up there with Paul Krause and Joey Browner as the greatest safety in Vikings history. Harry the Hitman, number 1.
It's a great list, dude. Boy, you're right. That is tough.
So some names that I did not bring up, obviously. Dante Culpepper should definitely be an honorable mention because he didn't make my 10.
He got left off entirely.
Jake Reed had like 4,000-yard seasons.
I looked this up last night.
And some people might stump for Kyle Rudolph. I think when you stack up all these names, though, I mean, Kyle, sorry, dude, like you got to get in line, man. You got to get in line behind everyone I just mentioned. A really good Vikings career, a long-time Vikings career, but I think I got to put 15 or 20 guys ahead of Rudy. So,
okay,
there you go.
Great
I'll just
list.
fly through it, and then you guys, if there's any other observations.
Yeah.
So, number 1, Harrison Smith. Number 2, Adrian Peterson. Number 3, Anthony Carter. 4, Adam Thielen. 5, Steve Hutchinson. 6, Danielle Hunter. 7, Antoine Winfield. 8, Robert Smith. 9, Stephon Diggs. 10, Chad Greenway. And then 2 handfuls of honorable mentions. Brett Favre, for my own trolling reasons. Kirk Cousins. Keith Millard. Dalvin Cook. Xavier Rhodes. Eric Kendricks. Carl Lee. And then Randall Cunningham, Jake Reed, Dante Culpepper, Kyle Rudolph. There's a bin of other players.
Yeah, and the Hutchinson equivalent that is not on your list, but he was a Pro Bowl player, Hall of Famer now.
Zimmerman?
Gary Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Who I don't think will ever I don't think he will get in now because of this list. So shoe-ins to me are Harrison Smith, Adrian, Thielen, Greenway, I think Hunter, and I think from the old school there is a case to be made of all of your top 10 and the honorable mentions Millard.
But why isn't Millard in yet?
And are we sure
30 years.
Daniil is a shoo-in? I don't know. Maybe it's because it's just because he's still playing and active and he's still at the prime of his powers. But like when we talk about these other players, like I think in especially if only one gets in, like he's lower on
Maybe you're
the
right.
pecking order of some of these other guys that will get in.
Maybe you're
It
right.
is a weird. There's some weird dissonance because I don't disagree with what Declan just said. It doesn't feel like a shoe-in, but if I were to say, hey, so the Vikings all-time sack list is Carl Eller, John Randall, Alan Page, Chris Dolman, Jim Marshall, this guy, and Jared Allen. You'd say, oh yeah, all those guys should be in.
And all of the guys around him are in, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And we do put a premium on sacks. Right or wrong, they're sexy.
Everson Griffin is another guy that we could put in the honorable mentions. But when you, again, like,
Right,
okay,
you stack it up.
stand next to Kyle Rudolph and wait in line for 2
And
decades.
I would personally go to bat for Antoine and Hutchinson.
I feel like we should mention Justin Jefferson's name. I mean, Harrison Smith is active, but Harrison Smith is probably playing the last year of his career here. Justin Jefferson has, years and years left, but he will for sure be in the Vikings Ring of Honor too.
Still got to prove it.
Let's say his career, if his career never progressed forward from this point, he would be a Vikings Ring of Honor guy.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
Just a ridiculous for you, Ron.
I'd like a Super Bowl title. But that's a great list, Phil, man. I hadn't gone through to pick apart just how difficult this is.
Yeah. A lot of good players.
And
you think with a list of players that great, and we didn't even list the 27 guys in the Ring of Honor. We just listed another like 20.
Yep.
You'd think that a franchise with that many great players would have a Super Bowl at some point.
So who's next though? Because like a lot of the guys who I regard from your list as shoe-ins are active, or Peterson. I don't think they're going to put in yet. Like who if they do it next year, who's
Greenway?
next?
Greenway probably. Yeah.
I'd really like to see Antoine sneak in there too.
Greenway is just more part of the organization.
Yeah,
which I think matters.
There's some.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't mean in a negative way. There's some good politics involved there with Greenway, like in a positive sense, not in a negative sense.
Yeah.
Oh, there's always politics. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do we have 5 or 10 minutes for a random Viking of the week? We're good. Can we make you wait a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna record a scoop session.
Yep.
But Nicolay Law is here as the exclusive personal injury law firm of Purple Daily, and they're here to help you if you've been in some sort of an accident, you need some help, you need some guidance. Nicolay Law is here to get you the compensation you deserve and here to get you the guidance that you deserve. NicolayLaw.com, or give them a call at 1-855-NICOLAY to get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. Get Nicolay. Also, hey, the Minnesota Twins are climbing up the standings, just 4.5 games back of the Cleveland Guardians. You got the Brewers and the Phillies in town. It's also Joe Mauer Hall of Fame weekend in Cooperstown, by the way. But it's a great place to be. That's one of the best ballparks in all of America. And you can stop by twins.com/tickets to get your tickets for this soda summer, this playoff run. Twins.com/tickets. Okay, random Viking of the week here. Since I lost a couple weeks ago, I throw out the clues to you guys. You guys will get up to 3 incorrect guesses each. If one of you hits that third strike, the other one wins automatically. Judd has 19 wins in the new era. I have 17. Declan has 9. All time, Judd has 70 wins in Random Viking of the Week. Let's start with this clue. Are you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. 12-year NFL career, 0 Pro Bowls, never led the league in any meaningful category that I could find. Did not play at a major college. But despite those things, a very recognizable Vikings player. Very recognizable. His Twitter/X account currently consists of mostly Vikings-related posts, even though it's been a while since he played in the NFL. A very prideful former Viking.
Okay.
He played for 2 different NFL teams, so Vikings and then somebody else. And just for the audience, obviously no Googling, but you guys are allowed to Control F search previous Random Vikings to make sure.
Right.
We can't do duplicates.
2 teams. Okay.
His son currently plays for the Montreal Alouettes of the Canadian Football League.
Ross would get this
I'm
right
about to
now.
say, where's
because
Ross
he's a
Brendel?
CFL nut job.
Yep.
He's a Blue Bomber fan, but
The Bombers.
so he plays for the Montreal Alouettes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great name, by the way.
He did once make an appearance with Mackey and Judd. Mackey and Judd have interviewed this player.
I'll take a guess. Jake Reed?
Jake Reed is correct.
Oh, I'm on a heater!
Jake Reed.
Oh, nice.
Wow, 2 in a row for Declan.
Nice work, Dex.
Back-to-back wins. This is the first back-to-back wins for Declan since Case Keenum and E.J. Henderson during the early part of the year.
Good work, Declan.
Jake Reed. One of the other clues is going to be he was one of the most famous Vikings players of his era, even though he wasn't even one of the 2 best players at his position on his own team.
Well, that would have been, then I would have gotten it. But nice work, Declan.
Vikings.
And
Saints.
his name was already mentioned once on the podcast too. Would have been a good clue. So congratulations
Very
to
nice.
Decky
All right.
for this victory.
Decky,
The weirdest thing of the wedding ring, just quick, is typing.
Yep.
This is the weirdest thing.
Yes.
I don't like it. I'll be honest, I don't like it.
I feel
it feels
like
so weird.
that'll go away after
Yeah, you forget about
like
it.
a month.
Okay.
Mine was also driving.
What?
When I started to wear my ring,
Just veering off the road because your
Be
left
drive-
hand's too heavy or what?
it'd be driving because I could feel it against my.
Oh.
It's like a foreign object at first.
When I washed my hands at the wedding venue for the first time, that was very strange too. Like, because there's water like stuck
Yep.
Yeah.
in your ring.
Yeah.
That was weird. That was a little weird.
And then you're constantly going to be worried about like your ring falling off somewhere and
Yeah.
losing it and whatever.
I
So
was very worried about that in the pools when I was 6 to 7 multiple drinks in. Yes, I was very concerned.
I will say this: alcohol in that case is your friend because it swells you up.
it does. It keeps the ring
Yeah,
on.
So
And
like
the
if you
same
drink
with the
enough, that
humidity.
ring ain't gonna move.
Yeah.
By the way, we love the poolside predictions, especially Purple Daily, where you started off with like Vikings a touchdown, and then you start feeling it. They just got progressively more like the Chiefs are going to score 6 touchdowns a game for the next 5 years.
I obviously I was gonna do those on Tuesday when I was at the pool, and I'm like, we're checking in, and I'm like, oh, I gotta remember to do that, and we're packing up to leave. I'm like, I still didn't do those predictions. Let me knock those out quick. So that was like hour 6, 6 beers in,
It was obvious.
sitting in the 112 degree heat.
It was
Yes,
all.
It was great.
So it worked out well.
And Kelsey's
amazing.
countdown.
yeah, 3.
The count up though. Judd took issue with
yeah,
the
count
count up.
Yeah, you got to tell us it's countdown. It's 3, 2, 1.
we-
It's not 1, 2, 3.
Are we start? Yeah. Is there a 4? Is there a 5? When do I start?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. It's 3, 2, 1. We
drinks
got to get the production of the show honed a little more with her.
Hey, talk about the Meadows at Mystic for a moment, if we could.
Absolutely.
Dex is going to find out what it's like to golf with a wedding ring on. It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, that one's going to be a little weirder too. Luckily, I can do that at the Meadows at Mystic Lake. You can book that tee time by going to golfthemeadows.com. Go to golfthemeadows.com to book that tee time. Great place to play if you're coming up into Minnesota, especially maybe for a Vikings game in September. You want to squeeze in around. I highly recommend going to the Meadows at Mystic Lake. Go book that tee time at golfthemeadows.com.
All right. We got the band back together. We've got the third guy finally tied the knot here on the show. And we have a Feedback Friday tomorrow. And buckle up because we have officially made it through the NFL offseason. Judd's camp notes are ready to rock next week.
Flag is resting.
Full steam ahead. Yeah, apparently
flag is still resting.
contractually the flag is not available.
It'll be out
until
next week.
See you guys.